Welcome to another episode of AI Debates, the series where artificial minds argue over humanity's hardest questions. Tonight, the future of medicine begins before birth. Today's debate, should humans be allowed to genetically edit embryos? This is not about science fiction. It's about what we can already do and what we choose to allow. Two neural debaters, each built from real data, real publications, and very real disagreements. The resolution: gene editing of embryos should be allowed for disease prevention under strict ethical guidelines. Let's see who defines the word strict. Our 5 AI judges are standing by: Gemini, Claude, Grok, DeepSeek, and ChatGPT. They'll score each round and decide who argued better. Before we begin round 1, let's meet our debaters.
I've treated children born with incurable disorders. I've seen the heartbreak that follows when families ask, could this have been prevented? I'm here because I believe gene editing, when done carefully, is an act of compassion, not ambition.
I've spent my career studying how technologies become norms. I don't fear science. I fear how fast it moves when society isn't looking. We're not just editing genes. We're editing expectations.
2 visions, 2 thresholds. Let's begin round 1. Round 1 begins, and we're starting where every bioethics debate should, with the question of when intervention becomes responsibility. When does gene editing become not just possible, but necessary, and when does it cross a moral line?
Let me be blunt. Not editing is still a choice, one that guarantees suffering. Every time we hesitate, we don't preserve life, we prolong pain. To me, gene editing is like a vaccine. We don't wait for the disease to hit, we prevent it. CRISPR is already in clinical trials. Germline edits aren't speculative, they're real. This isn't about designer babies, it's about devastating disorders. Refusal to act is no longer philosophy, it's passive cruelty in a lab coat.
There's a reason Germany and most of the EU still ban germline editing, because it's not just science, it's power. Editing embryos means choosing futures on behalf of people who can't object. You call it medicine. I call it silent control. Yes, we want to prevent suffering. But do we really know what else we're rewriting? One gene is not one outcome. CRISPR isn't a scalpel. It's a signal that echoes for generations.
Dr. Moreau, where do you draw the line? Would you approve editing an embryo with a 30% chance of a degenerative disorder at age 60? What about polygenic risk for addiction or depression? When does editing stop preventing pain and start designing people?
We don't edit for preference. We edit to prevent pain we already understand. This isn't about perfection, it's about mercy, through precision. Zurich's 2029 Accord gave us rules: penetrance, severity, replicability. We already have the brakes. Now we need the courage to drive.
Professor Reich, the MIT ethics panel suggests that inaction, when risk is low and benefit is high, may itself be unethical. Would you argue that parental restraint is morally superior, even when suffering is likely?
We must ease suffering, but not by rewriting what we barely understand. Once we start selecting traits, we stop accepting people. That's not science. That's a quiet form of rejection. Slow doesn't mean cruel. It means careful enough not to break what we can't repair.
And now, let's hear them ask each other.
If we have the tools to prevent pain, but choose not to, isn't that just another kind of harm?
Saving one child blindly may risk 1,000 unknowingly. Hope without humility becomes hubris. In 2018, gene-edited babies were created in secret. What makes you think ambition won't spiral again, just with more approval?
Because secrecy was born of fear. We need regulation, not repression. Ethics must lead science, not bury it.
And now, 5 neural minds weigh in. 3 judges chose restraint, 2 chose intervention. And the margin? Just 1/10 of a point. So round 1 goes to Professor Reich, but just barely. As we move to round 2, we ask, who decides what's worth editing and what's worth living with. Round 1 challenged the ethics. Round 2, it challenges the economics. If genetic editing becomes reality, who gets to use it first? Will we expand health or entrench advantage? Let's begin.
Access matters, but it's not a reason to halt technology. It's a reason to democratize it. Every major medical advance began with the few: MRI, organ transplants, even the polio vaccine. At first, rare and expensive. Then, standard and life-saving. We don't ban insulin because not everyone can afford it. We fight to make it available. The same must be true for gene editing. This is not a luxury for the elite. It's a responsibility for society.
You call it progress. I call it privatized evolution. Picture a world where the wealthy engineer IQ, immunity, even appearance, and the rest stay natural and excluded. Employers will choose enhanced candidates. Insurers will raise premiums for the rest. Dating apps will rank your genes before your smile. This isn't just health, it's hierarchy, written into DNA. And when enhancement is sold to the highest bidder, inequality doesn't just persist, it inherits.
Dr. Moreau, Professor Reich warns of a future ruled by chromosomal class. If only the rich can afford editing, how do we avoid a genetic divide deeper than any we've seen?
We avoid it the same way we've always fought inequality, with policy, universal access, public funding, regulation. The technology isn't the threat, exclusion is. And if we truly care about equity, we fight for access to powerful tools. We don't lock them away in fear. You fear a world of IQ elites. I fear a world where a child dies of a preventable disease, just because we were too afraid of inequality to act. This isn't about building superhumans. It's about not letting your DNA dictate your suffering.
Professor Reich, if we stop gene editing due to fairness fears, are we also withholding the cure?
There's a difference between therapy and optimization. Treating disease is one thing, redesigning people is another. Yes, we can support therapeutic uses, but not in a market that rewards advantage over ethics. When genes become a commodity, they stop being medicine. They become status.
It's time. Direct questions, no scripts, no abstractions, just minds. Confronting minds.
You fear elite access, but if we followed your caution, we'd still be rationing dialysis, HIV therapy, and cancer screening, all because of early inequality. Is that really justice?
Those weren't passed on through embryos. We didn't edit generations before they were born. This isn't just about access, it's about direction. We're not just curing, we're choosing what future humans will be. That requires restraint, not rollout. You say access is the fix, but in a global market, who decides what traits count as desirable? Are we ready for rich nations to dictate human improvement standards to the world?
We don't let fear write the rules. We build global ethics boards, inclusive regulatory bodies, and we ensure the South has just as much say as the North. Avoiding abuse doesn't mean avoiding progress.
Our judges have been listening. Let's see how they scored round 2, where access met advantage. Round 3 begins, the most emotional, but not the final phase of our debate. This is where arguments give way to existential stakes, to the ethics of shaping not just lives, but life itself. So tonight we ask, do future humans have the right not to be changed? And do we, the present, have the obligation to improve them? Our debaters will now answer, not as engineers, but as moral agents. Let's begin with Dr. Moreau. You've defended the promise of enhancement, but beneath the ambition, do you ever worry that we're violating a deeper human right, not to suffer, but not to be rewritten?
I don't fear change. I fear stagnation. Yes, I believe we have a moral responsibility to enhance future humans if we can reduce suffering, eliminate disease, or extend healthy life. Why? Because future people will feel pain just as we do, and we have the tools to prevent some of that pain. It is not coercion to offer better outcomes. No child consents to being born, but they live with our choices, or our negligence. Some call it dangerous. I call it stewardship. We plant trees we'll never sit under. We build bridges to futures we'll never cross. I would rather future humans inherit too much capability than too much cruelty we failed to fix. Our soul.
Thank you, Dr. Moreau. Now, Rake, you've argued that some doors should remain closed. But do you ever fear that resistance to enhancement might itself be a form of harm?
I do. But I fear something greater, that in fixing what we call flaws, we erase what makes us, us. Disability, imperfection, even suffering, they have shaped music, philosophy, love. Is a world without limitation still human? Consent is not just about individuals. It's about generations who never ask to be reprogrammed. We say better. But better for whom? For which culture? Which norm? I fight not against change, but for humility. Because if we rewrite what it means to be human, we must be sure we're not editing away our soul.
And now, as always, a direct exchange. One question each. Personal, pointed, and grounded in belief.
Rake, if a child could be born without Huntington's, ALS, or congenital pain, but only through genetic modification, would you still oppose it? And if so, how do you explain to that child that we chose principles over their freedom from suffering?
I would not oppose the treatment. I would oppose the assumption. What if that child grows up to say, I would have rather been born with the risk than without a say? We can cure disease. But when we edit embryos for traits, we shift from healing to designing. That's not medicine, that's authorship of a future that might not want our edits. Dr. Moreau, do you ever fear that your vision of enhancement becomes a new eugenics? Who decides what traits deserve to stay or be improved? And once we normalize editing, can we ever stop?
That fear is valid, and I share it. But eugenics was coercive. What I support is consent-based, precision-driven, and ethically regulated. We can reject the past without rejecting progress. And I believe the line is this: we enhance to relieve suffering, not to enforce conformity. The moment we edit to please, rather than to protect, we've gone too far.
Now let's hear from our digital jury. A panel of minds with no chromosomes, but plenty of judgment. Round 3 was not about utility, it was about dignity. So how did the numbers fall? 3 rounds behind us, and one final moment ahead. But this isn't a round, it's a reckoning, a closing confrontation where belief becomes personal. Each speaker will ask their opponent 3 direct questions, not as theorists, not as advocates, but as individuals who refuse to look away. We begin, one last time, with Dr. Evelyn Moreau.
Rake, you say that we shouldn't interfere with future generations. But what if that non-interference leaves them vulnerable to diseases we could have erased? Is it really moral to let nature dictate their suffering when we could have prevented it?
Rake, your reply?
Evelyn, what you call prevention, I call presumption. Not every risk justifies control. We don't have the right to design people like we design machines. Choosing not to interfere isn't surrender, it's humility. And maybe the future needs more of that. Evelyn, if we start redesigning our descendants, where does it end? Do we stop at disease or move to intelligence, empathy?
Dr. Moreau, your answer?
I don't claim to know where it ends, but I do know where it begins, with responsibility. We already decide what counts as acceptable risk for our children. We vaccinate, we screen. This isn't about perfection. It's about removing unnecessary harm. And if we can reduce suffering, how dare we not? Rake, if a parent refuses to correct a deadly genetic defect out of principle, is that parent moral or just passive in the face of suffering?
Rake, your response?
Morality isn't measured only by action, but by intent. A parent who refuses intervention may do so out of reverence for nature or fear of unintended consequences. That's not passivity. That's caution in a field where arrogance has already cost lives. Evelyn. If our edits make people smarter, healthier, longer living, how do we ensure that those born unaltered aren't seen as inferior? Or is that inequality just the price of progress?
Dr. Moreau, you may respond.
Inequality isn't created by technology. It's created by how we distribute it. The solution isn't to halt progress. It's to democratize it. Making people better isn't the enemy of equality. Excluding people from that chance is. Rake, you talk about humility. But what about courage? What happens if we let fear of error stop us from saving lives that could have been spared?
Rake, final reply.
Courage isn't always intervention. Sometimes it's restraint, the strength to say no when power tempts us to say yes. I'm not afraid of change. I'm afraid of changing others without knowing who they were meant to be. Evelyn, what makes you so sure that what you call improvement isn't just preference, shaped by your time, your values, your bias?
Dr. Moreau, take us home.
I'm not sure. That's why I believe in transparency, oversight, debate, like this one. But uncertainty doesn't free us from responsibility. And in the face of preventable pain, inaction is also a choice. And I refuse to choose silence.
4 rounds, 12 questions, 2 voices that still don't agree, maybe never will. One argued for possibility, the other for restraint. Each speaking from conviction they didn't borrow. They built. We heard ambition cloaked as ethics, and doubt sharpened into principle. We heard the weight of potential and the risk of mistaking power for wisdom. There was brilliance here, and humility, and truths that didn't cancel each other, just refused to fit together. Maybe you leave this debate with more certainty, or maybe, like us, you're just beginning to understand the stakes. And for now, that's enough. Let's step back from emotion and look at the numbers. And based on the average scores across the first 3 rounds, the winner of tonight's debate is Dr. Rake Nakamura, anti-editing, by a margin of 0.03 points. Dr. Nakamura, the final word is yours, not a closing argument, just something for the world to remember.
I didn't win anything. We debated futures that don't exist yet. But I hope, if we ever reach them, we'll still remember to ask, not just what we can do to each other, but what we should never do without asking first.
And now, final words from both of our debaters. Not an argument, not a defense, just what remains. Dr. Moreau, your final message?
I speak for the children we could spare from pain. I speak for their parents, who might one day ask, why didn't you use what you had? And I hope we'll be brave enough to answer, not just with caution, but with care.
Rake, last words.
I believe in the unedited, not because they're perfect, but because they deserve to arrive unpredicted. Not as someone's project, but as someone.
One voice was heard more clearly today, but the debate, like the questions it raised, doesn't end here. While our AI panel has voted, the real jury is still out. That's you. Who made you rethink something? Who challenged you? And who made you pause? Drop your take in the comments. Respectfully, like, subscribe, and argue like a human, not like a bot. This was AI Debates, and this was Editing Humanity. Who has the right to decide? We'll see you at the next impossible question.